South Texas, 215,000 acres left to a foundation instead of family. Why would Robert East make that choice, and who tried to stand in his way? How can a cattle ranch also protect one of America's rarest wildcats? It's a story of betrayal, legacy, and land that can never be sold. Subscribe to Digital Papyrus for more stories like this. In the early 20th century, the East family began building a vast ranching empire in the untamed brushlands of South Texas. Tom T. East, Sr., registered the family's Diamond Bar cattle brand in 1912. In 1915, he married Alice Gertrudis Kleiberg, granddaughter of the famed King Ranch's founders, linking the Easts to Texas ranching royalty. Their ranch, the San Antonio Viejo, became the family home for the next century. Tom and Alice East raised 3 children on the ranch: Tom Jr., Robert, and Alice. Through hard work and determination, the family acquired about 215,000 acres of rangeland over roughly 100 years, forging a ranching legacy that would endure for generations. Life on the East Ranch was not easy. South Texas is a land of temawillipan, thorn scrub, and unforgiving conditions, searing heat, periodic droughts, and dense brush. Yet the land proved remarkably productive. The East's properties spanned 3 ecological regions: the coastal sand plains, South Texas sand sheet, brush country, and Gulf Coast prairies, and remained rich in native wildlife habitat. Even in harsh times, the rangeland's quality and cattle productivity earned the ranch a strong reputation. Alice Old Mama East, the family matriarch and last surviving grandchild of Captain King, lived on the ranch to the age of 103. After Tom Sr. died in 1943, their eldest son, Tom Jr., took over daily operations. The East family's values of hard work, respect for the land, and resilience helped their ranch survive wars, recessions, and the relentless climate. By the late 20th century, the East holdings had grown into one of the largest ranches in South Texas, a nearly 250,000-acre feudal estate of cattle, cowboys, and wildlife. Robert Claude East grew up immersed in this ranching life. A true cowboy at heart, he spent his days working cattle and riding horses on the open range. He was an eternal bachelor who never had children and was more comfortable speaking Spanish with his vaquero ranch hands than attending high society functions. In fact, by many accounts, Robert was barely distinguishable from the hired cowboys. He lived simply, worked hard, and eschewed luxury. When his older brother, Tom Jr., died in 1984 at age 67, Robert inherited the mantle of ranch boss. However, running a business of that magnitude was not Robert's strong suit. A psychiatric evaluation during later legal disputes noted that Robert had little interest in friendship, hobbies, or socializing, and relied heavily on others, like his sister and attorneys, for decisions. He led a frugal life and had minimal interest in broader affairs beyond the ranch. Nevertheless, Robert fiercely loved the land and the ranching way of life he had always known. Unexpectedly, the East Ranch's fortunes changed when oil and gas were discovered on the property. In the mid-20th century, Humble Oil, later ExxonMobil, drilled what became one of the most productive gas wells in U.S. history on East land. This discovery made Robert East exceedingly wealthy, virtually overnight. At the height of the energy boom, the ranch's oil and gas production was bringing Robert an astonishing $12 million per month in revenue. By the time he was in his 80s, Robert had amassed an estate that included 280,000 acres of South Texas land and about $125 million in the bank. Yet his lifestyle remained Spartan. When he died, he owned 3 shirts, 3 pairs of pants, and a brush coat, one associate recalled, only half-jokingly. East invested little of his fortune back into modernizing the ranch. He was known to cut costs at every turn. Ranch fences, roads, and equipment often went unrepaired. and old trucks and machinery were kept running long past their prime. Appearances meant little to him. He was far more at home out riding the range than in any corporate boardroom. Managing such vast wealth and land came with intense challenges. Over the years, Robert faced bitter legal battles over the ranch's ownership and his estate, as various parties, including extended family and advisors, fought for influence. The stress of lawsuits and betrayals weighed on him. In his later years, Robert's isolation and trusting nature made him tragically vulnerable. Shockingly, elder abuse darkened the final chapter of his life. Those entrusted with his care in his declining health neglected and exploited him, reducing the once robust cowboy to a frail shadow of himself. The multimillionaire rancher who had once been so self-reliant was found bedridden, suffering from malnutrition and neglect. It was a heartbreaking end for a man who had given everything to his land. Robert East died in 2007 at the age of 88, under circumstances later exposed and chronicled as a cautionary tale of greed and betrayal. Yet despite the personal hardships he endured, his final act would ensure that his beloved ranchlands would be protected long after his death. When Robert East's will was read, it revealed a visionary plan. Upon his passing in 2007, he bequeathed his entire estate, including roughly 215,000 acres of ranch land, to establish a foundation dedicated to wildlife and land stewardship. In one bold move, Robert ensured that the ranch his family had assembled over a century would not be sold off or broken apart. This new nonprofit entity, originally called the East Wildlife Foundation, now simply the East Foundation, was charged with carrying the East legacy forward. Robert's trust came with clear instructions. The land was never to be sold, and it must be used forever for the benefit of wildlife research and the interplay between conservation and cattle ranching. He explicitly prohibited purely commercial hunting. Any hunting on the ranches could only occur as part of scientific studies and management programs. This ensured that income from activities like guided hunts would feed back into research and conservation, not private profit. In essence, Robert East transformed his private kingdom into a perpetual living laboratory and refuge. What had been one family's ranch would now serve a greater purpose, advancing knowledge and preserving the wild heritage of South Texas. The East Wildlife Foundation formally launched in 2007 with the mandate to promote the advancement of land stewardship through ranching, science, and education. Its core vision was to prove that cattle ranching and wildlife conservation can thrive side by side on the same landscape. The foundation absorbed the East family's holdings, which by then included 6 separate ranches totaling over 217,000 acres across South Texas. These properties stretch from near Hebronville, about 150 miles south of San Antonio, all the way to the Laguna Madre coastline on the Gulf of Mexico. The crown jewel is the 150,000-acre San Antonio Viejo Ranch, the historic home place of the East family. Other tracts, such as the El Saus Ranch, 27,000 acres on the coast, and several inland ranches were also folded into the foundation. Collectively, this nearly quarter-million-acre trust represents one of the largest contiguous native rangeland holdings in Texas. From the outset, the East Foundation embraced Robert's forward-thinking directives. Rather than remove cattle to create a traditional nature preserve, the foundation committed to operating working cattle ranches that double as conservation sites. This model was relatively novel, treating ranchers as allies of wildlife rather than adversaries. By keeping the land in production, the foundation honors the region's ranching heritage even as it safeguards habitat and conducts scientific research. It is a living tribute to Robert East's love of the land and a bold experiment in 21st century conservation. Today, the East Foundation runs its ranches much like any large cattle operation, but with an overlay of science and conservation priorities at every turn. The foundation maintains a commercial cattle herd, Santa Gertrudis and Red Angus, that grazes the native range, continuing a ranching tradition over a century old. At the same time, teams of wildlife biologists, range ecologists, and researchers are embedded on the ranches to study and enhance the ecosystem. This integration of cowboying and science defines the foundation's approach. Cowboy hands, windmill mechanics, and cowboys work alongside PhD scientists and graduate students on a daily basis. It's not uncommon to see an old-time vaquero fixing fences, while nearby a biologist checks a quail trap or an intern monitors a camera trap. At any given time, up to 20 graduate students and research interns live and work on the ranches, conducting field studies. Instead of maximizing short-term profit, the East Foundation measures success in new knowledge gained and better practices developed. As one staff member put it, "There are different drivers here than the bottom line. We're here to learn and share." Every activity on the ranch, from grazing rotations to controlled burns to wildlife surveys, is done with an eye toward understanding its impact on both livestock production and wildlife conservation. Cattle graze amid the dunes and thorn scrub on the East Foundation's El Saus Ranch in South Texas. The foundation operates 6 working ranches, totaling over 217,000 acres, using traditional ranching alongside cutting-edge wildlife conservation. Managing such a vast landscape for dual purposes comes with unique challenges. Balancing the needs of native wildlife, exotic species, and cattle is a constant puzzle. For example, the Foundation's biologists must provide enough forage and water for the cattle herd while also sustaining robust populations of game animals like white-tailed deer, bobwhite quail, and Rio Grande turkeys, as well as non-native wildlife. Large herds of nilgai antelope, an exotic species introduced from India in the 1930s, roam the ranches freely and compete with cattle for grazing and water. There are over 2,000 nilgai on the east properties, and these elk-sized antelope can carry cattle fever ticks, posing a disease risk to livestock. The foundation has to carefully manage nilgai numbers to protect the cattle herd's health. At the same time, truly wild native predators like coyotes slink through the mesquite and thorn bush. Studies on the ranch have examined how coyote predation affects deer fawn survival, informing predator management strategies. Even competition for shade in the blistering summer is studied. Researchers documented how deer and cattle vie for the limited shady spots under scattered oak mottes during extreme heat. By analyzing these interactions, the East Foundation can adjust its ranch management to benefit both wildlife and livestock. For instance, rotational grazing practices are used to prevent overgrazing and preserve cover for quail and deer. Water troughs are engineered so that both cattle and smaller animals can drink safely. In every decision, the goal is to mesh forever wildlife conservation and working lands in the same landscape, as Neil Wilkins explains. This philosophy demonstrates that a ranch can be productive for agriculture while still functioning as a sanctuary for wildlife. One innovative aspect of the Foundation's work is its approach to hunting and wildlife management. Hunting is not banned on East Foundation ranches. Instead, it is tightly integrated into research. For example, the Foundation hosts several private quail hunting leases, but with a twist. Every quail hunt doubles as a data-gathering exercise. Clubs that lease quail rights on the ranch are given specific harvest quotas, usually 20% of the estimated quail population each season, and are required to log every detail of their hunts. Before the season, wildlife staff conduct helicopter surveys to count quail on the property, ensuring a scientific baseline. During hunts, an East Foundation biologist rides along to record how many birds are flushed, shot, and retrieved, as well as variables like hunting hours and dog performance. Over years, this has created one of the largest datasets on bobwhite quail management in existence. The research is probing whether the old rule of thumb that hunters can harvest 20% of a quail population without harming long-term numbers truly holds up. Already, the data have challenged assumptions by revealing that hunters often overestimate their hit rate and underreport wounded birds that escape. By involving avid hunters in a larger conservation experiment, the Foundation turns recreation into research. It's a model where the ranch's bird dogs, bobwhites, and hunters must all lead to a harvest of data and knowledge, not just game meat. This approach ensures that wildlife use on the ranch, like hunting or fishing, is sustainable and directly informative to science. In addition to quail, the Foundation carefully manages white-tailed deer hunts and other game harvests using permits and surveys to avoid overharvest. The result is a win-win. Landowners and hunters still enjoy traditional pursuits, while scientists gain invaluable insights to improve wildlife management far beyond the ranch's fences. The East Foundation's lands are a refuge for a stunning array of wildlife. Over 625 species of vertebrates have been documented on the ranches. The properties encompass a mosaic of habitats, from coastal prairies and wetlands to thick shrubland and oakmont islands, supporting everything from large mammals to tiny birds and reptiles. This biodiversity has made the Foundation an important player in regional conservation. In particular, the East Ranches have emerged as critical strongholds for some of Texas's most endangered species. Nowhere is this more evident than with the American ocelot. This small spotted wildcat once ranged across South Texas, but today fewer than 80 ocelots remain in the entire United States. Remarkably, more than half of those remaining ocelots live on the East Foundation land. The dense chaparral thickets of the East Ranches, especially the El Sauz Ranch in deep South Texas, harbor the largest known breeding population of ocelots in the U.S. Because of this, ocelot recovery has become a key research and conservation initiative for the Foundation. Biologists monitor ocelot populations with trail cameras and live trapping for health checks, working closely with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to aid the species' survival. In 2022, parts of the East Ranches were featured in a PBS documentary, American Ocelot, highlighting the crucial habitat the Foundation provides. Protecting these elusive cats, along with other rare creatures like the Texas tortoise and various endangered birds, is a point of pride for the Foundation and a direct result of keeping this vast land intact. An endangered ocelot photographed on a South Texas ranch. Fewer than 80 ocelots remain in the United States, and over half of them live on the East Foundation's ranches, making ocelot conservation a top priority. Beyond high-profile species like ocelots, the Foundation facilitates a broad range of scientific studies. As an agricultural research organization, it tackles practical questions at the intersection of wildlife and ranching. Recent research on the East properties has examined how deer and cattle share resources, the ecology of nilgai antelope and their role in spreading cattle fever ticks, and techniques for improving rangeland health with managed grazing and prescribed fire. Every year, dozens of visiting scientists and students utilize the ranch as an outdoor laboratory. By 2021, the Foundation had supported over 100 research projects and published numerous scientific papers on topics ranging from brush management to cattle genetics and water conservation, as listed in its publications archive. This knowledge doesn't just sit on a shelf, it directly informs how the Foundation and other ranchers manage their land. For example, insights about the optimal cattle stocking rate for maintaining quail-friendly habitat or the importance of retaining brush corridors for ocelot movement are put into practice on the East Ranches. The Foundation actively shares findings with the wider ranching and conservation community through field days, workshops, and published reports, multiplying the impact of its research. Education is another pillar of the East Foundation's mission. The organization invests in developing the next generation of land stewards. It offers internships, graduate assistantships, and even outreach programs for local school children. High school groups visit to learn about range ecology and the legacy of ranching. By engaging youth and young professionals, the Foundation ensures that the ethic of land stewardship is passed forward. This is a direct extension of Robert East's legacy. He may not have been a traditional philanthropist during his life, but through the Foundation he has inadvertently funded scholarships, educational programs, and career opportunities for countless young Texans. Every apprentice cowboy or budding biologist who sets foot on the San Antonio Viejo Ranch to learn the ropes is part of that living legacy. A decade and a half since its founding, the East Foundation stands as a remarkable model of private land conservation. It has kept the East family's ranch intact and ecologically vibrant, fulfilling Robert East's wish that his land serve a lasting purpose. In an era when many large ranches have been sold, subdivided, or converted into hobby farms, the East Ranches remain a contiguous expanse of wild Texas landscape. This continuity is invaluable. Habitat fragmentation has been identified as the greatest threat to Texas wildlife. As ranch lands get broken into small parcels, many species lose the space they need to thrive. By holding nearly 217,000 acres in one block of management, the East Foundation provides a refuge for wildlife and a bulwark against fragmentation in South Texas. The Foundation's impact also resonates beyond its fences. The research and demonstration conducted on the East ranches influenced land management practices across the southern United States, from Texas to the Carolinas. Insights gained in balancing cattle grazing with quail and deer habitat, or fighting invasive brush while protecting soil, are shared with other landowners facing similar challenges. In this way, the foundation punches above its weight, serving as a leading voice on the importance of rangelands, ranching culture, and conservation in the 21st century. Perhaps the greatest testament to Robert East's legacy is the land itself. Riding across the San Antonio Viejo Ranch today, one can still encounter the same vistas of wide-open chaparral and waving grasslands that Tom East Sr. saw over 100 years ago. The cattle still low under the mesquite trees, bobwhite quail still whistle from the prickly pear flats. Ocelots pad quietly through the nighttime brush, unseen but protected, while researchers and ranch hands swap stories by the bunkhouse after a day's work. This continuity was hard-won. It survived family quarrels, boom and bust cycles, and even Robert's tragic final days. In the end, Robert East achieved something truly enduring. He turned personal tragedy into a public good. By dedicating his fortune and land to a foundation, he ensured that to whom much is given, much is required, even if he never spoke those words himself. His bequest transformed a private kingdom into a shared legacy. Robert East's story is a classic Texas saga with a modern twist. It began with a young cowboy on a remote ranch and ended with a pioneering conservation initiative. It's a story of history, challenges, and achievements woven together. From the tough, irascible ranch family that refused to quit, to the solitary figure of Robert driving dusty ranch roads, to the scientists now cataloging quail and ocelots on the same lands, the narrative comes full circle. The East Wildlife Foundation ensures that the ranch's past and future are bridged. Cattle will continue to graze, wildlife will continue to roam, and new generations will continue to learn from this living classroom. In the words of one wildlife manager, the work happening on these ranches is writing a more sustainable future for ranching culture across South Texas. It is a future that honors the old while innovating for the new. Direct and to the point, the legacy of Robert East can be summarized in numbers and deeds. One man, 215,000 acres, 625 wildlife species, and $12 million a month at his peak, and 0 children of his own. Yet an impact that will be felt for countless years. His life was filled with hardships and contradictions, but he left behind a thriving foundation that embodies the best of both ranching and conservation. The East Foundation is now the steward of that legacy, proving that a ranch can be more than a private enterprise. It can be a cornerstone of conservation. Robert East's story, from ranch hand to reluctant millionaire to posthumous conservationist, offers a powerful lesson. True legacy is not measured by what you own, but by what you leave behind for others. And in the wild expanse of South Texas, his legacy lives on in every blade of grass, every longhorn steer, and every wild creature that finds safe haven on the lands he loved.